Before you scroll past this, wait, just give me 60 seconds, because what I'm about to say might be the thing you've needed to hear for a long time, maybe years. Here's a question nobody really asks out loud. When did you stop treating yourself like someone worth protecting? Not in a dramatic way, not some big dramatic moment, just slowly, quietly. You started saying yes when you meant no. You started shrinking in rooms where you deserved to take up space. You started apologizing for things that weren't even your fault. And somewhere in all of that, you lost the thread back to yourself. That's not weakness. That's what happens when nobody teaches you self-respect as a practice. Not as a feeling, not as something you either have or you don't, but as something you build every single morning, one small decision at a time. The philosopher Immanuel Kant once wrote something that still stops people cold when they really sit with it. He said, paraphrasing slightly, that we should treat humanity, whether in our own person or in the person of another, always as an end, never merely as a means. Most people apply that outward. They think about how they treat others, but Kant meant you too. You are included in that humanity. You are not exempt from your own moral consideration. And yet, most of us live like we are. We give our best energy to jobs that drain us. We give our patience to people who rarely return it. We give our mornings to everyone else's notifications before we've even taken a single breath for ourselves. This video is about changing that. Not with motivation that evaporates by Tuesday, not with a feel-good list you'll forget, but with 9 real grounded lessons, the kind that rewire how you actually think about yourself over time. We're going through all 9 today, and I need you to stay for every single one, because they build on each other. Skip one, and you might miss the exact thing that clicks everything else into place. So, if this already resonates, go ahead and like this video right now. It takes 1 second, and it tells me to keep making content like this. Drop a comment below and tell me, on a scale of 1 to 10, how much do you actually respect yourself right now? Be honest, nobody's judging. And share this with someone in your life who quietly needs it. You probably already know who that person is. Subscribe if you're new here. We do this work together on this channel, every week. All right, let's get into it. If you showed up today, you are already ahead of who you were yesterday. Drop this in the comments. I am becoming. Lesson 1. Stop waiting for someone else to see your value. There's a pattern that almost nobody talks about, and it's exhausting to live inside of. It's the pattern of waiting. Waiting for your boss to finally acknowledge the work you've been quietly doing for months. Waiting for that person, maybe a parent, maybe a partner, to finally say, I see you. I'm proud of you. You matter. Waiting for external permission to feel good about who you are. And here's the painful part. Sometimes that acknowledgement never comes. Not because you don't deserve it, but because other people are so busy managing their own inner chaos, their own insecurities, their own blind spots, that they simply can't see you clearly. It's not always intentional, but the effect on you is real either way. The philosopher Jean-Jacques Rousseau spent considerable time writing about what he called amour propre, a concept that translates roughly as self-love, contingent on the opinions of others. His thinking may suggest that when a person's sense of worth becomes entirely dependent on external recognition, something quietly fractures in their relationship with themselves. They begin performing for an audience rather than living for themselves. They measure their inner life by the reactions of people who may never fully understand them. That habit can follow you well into adulthood, and most people don't even recognize it's happening. Think about the last time you did something you were genuinely proud of, something quiet, maybe nobody else even noticed. How did it feel? Did you let yourself feel proud, fully, without immediately minimizing it? Or did you catch yourself thinking, well, it's not that big a deal, or I wish someone had noticed? That moment, that internal dismissal, is where self-respect either gets built or quietly eroded. Here's what deep self-respect actually looks like in practice. It looks like finishing something and thinking, I did that well. Full stop. No asterisk. No but. It looks like valuing your own read on a situation, even when someone else disagrees. It looks like not needing the room to go quiet when you walk in, because your presence is already confirmed for you. This isn't arrogance. Arrogance is actually the opposite of self-respect. It's the performance of confidence by someone who doesn't genuinely have it yet. Real self-respect is quieter. It doesn't announce itself. It just holds. Now, practically, how do you start building this? One small shift. Every evening, write down one thing you did that day that you respect yourself for. Not something impressive. Something true. Maybe you held a boundary that was hard. Maybe you were honest when a lie would have been easier. Maybe you simply got up and kept going on a day when everything in you wanted to stop. That counts. Write it down. Say it to yourself like you'd say it to someone you love. Because here's the thing, and this is the part that takes time to really land. You will never fully receive from others what you haven't learned to give yourself first. That's not a cliché, it's mechanics. If your internal tank is full of doubt and dismissal, external validation pours right through it like water through a cracked cup. Fill the cup first. That's the work. As the philosopher Simone Weil wrote, and her thinking on attention and human dignity runs remarkably deep, the quality of attention we give to another person reflects the quality of regard we carry for ourselves. When we cannot receive our own care honestly, we cannot fully offer it outward either. The shift from performing worth to simply having it starts internally. It starts with you deciding, maybe for the first time, that you don't need a second opinion on your own value. Your worth was never theirs to decide. Prove it to yourself right now. Type this below. My value is not negotiable. Lesson 2. Your boundaries are not walls, they're definitions. Let's talk about something that gets misunderstood constantly. Boundaries. The word itself has become almost overused, thrown around in self-help spaces until it starts to feel hollow. But strip away the buzzword layer, and what you're left with is something genuinely important. Something that, when you actually understand it, changes how you move through every single relationship in your life. Here's how most people think about boundaries. As barriers. As ways to keep people out. As emotional walls you build when you've been hurt enough times that you stop wanting to let anyone close. That framing is not just inaccurate, it's actively harmful, because if you see boundaries as walls, you'll either build too many of them and end up isolated, or you'll resist building any at all because you don't want to seem cold, difficult, or closed off. Neither of those is self-respect. Both of them are just different flavors of self-abandonment. The philosopher John Stuart Mill, whose thinking on individual liberty remains one of the most carefully argued cases for personal autonomy ever written, framed something essential in his work on liberty. His argument may suggest that a person's right to define the terms of their own life, to determine what they will and will not accept within their own sphere, is not selfishness. It is the foundation of genuine selfhood. Without the ability to draw that line, a person doesn't have a self so much as a surface, shaped entirely by whatever external pressure happens to be strongest at any given moment. A boundary, understood this way, isn't "you can't do that." A boundary is "if that happens, here's what I'll do." The difference is enormous. One tries to manage someone else's behavior. The other takes full ownership of your own response. One is exhausting and ultimately impossible to maintain. The other is entirely within your control. So, what does this have to do with self-respect? Everything, because the moment you start defining what you need, and then actually honoring those definitions, you send yourself a very clear message. You're saying, my needs matter. My comfort is worth protecting. I am someone worth showing up for, and that includes showing up for myself. Every time you override a boundary you've privately set, every time you say yes to something your whole body said no to, you teach yourself that your internal signals don't matter. Do that enough times, and you stop trusting yourself. You stop even hearing the signal because you've trained yourself to ignore it. And here's the part that stings a little. Most of us don't violate our own boundaries because we're weak. We do it because we're afraid. Afraid of conflict, afraid of disappointing someone, afraid of being seen as too much, too demanding, too sensitive. We've been trained by families, by schools, by workplaces to prioritize smooth relationships over honest ones. But smooth isn't the same as healthy. A relationship with no tension isn't necessarily a relationship with respect. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do, for yourself and for the other person, is to tell the truth about what you need. Let me give you something concrete here. Think of one area in your life right now where you consistently feel resentful. A recurring situation where you walk away feeling drained, dismissed, or somehow less than when you walked in. Resentment is almost always a signal, not just an emotion. It's your inner life pointing at something that's being given away that shouldn't be. Where are you giving something away that you haven't consciously agreed to give? That's likely where a boundary needs to be named. Not dramatically, not with a big confrontation, just named. To yourself first, then, if necessary, to the other person. The morning practice here is simple but not easy. Before you start your day, before you check your phone, before you respond to anything, spend 2 minutes asking yourself, what do I actually need today? Not what's expected of me, not what's on the list. What do I need? And then, this is the part most people skip. Try to give yourself at least one version of that thing before you give your energy anywhere else. That's not selfish, that's sustainable. A plane that runs out of fuel doesn't help anyone reach their destination. And you already know what it feels like to run on empty. You've done it. It doesn't produce your best work, your warmest relationships, or your most honest self. It just produces survival mode with a polite face on. You were made for more than survival mode. As Mill's philosophy may suggest, people who live according to clearly defined personal principles tend to experience more genuine freedom than those who simply drift according to social expectation. Because clarity, even when it's uncomfortable in the short term, builds integrity over time. It lets people know where you actually stand. And it lets you know that your voice matters enough to use. One more thing before we move on. Setting a boundary and having someone respect it are two different things. You can't control the second part. Some people will push back. Some will get upset. Some will call you selfish for simply having needs. That reaction, as painful as it can feel, is actually information. It tells you something important about how much space that person was accustomed to taking up in your life, and how they respond when that space gets honestly renegotiated. Your job isn't to manage their reaction. Your job is to stay honest about what you need, and then let the relationship find its new shape from there. Sometimes it gets stronger. Sometimes it doesn't survive. Both outcomes tell you something real. Every time you honor what you need, you teach the world how to treat you. Write this down and drop it. My needs matter. Lesson 3. Stop apologizing for who you are. When did apologizing become your default setting? Seriously, think about it. How many times today have you said sorry for something that wasn't actually wrong? Sorry for needing a moment. Sorry for having a different opinion. Sorry for taking up space in a conversation. Sorry for existing at a volume that felt like too much for someone else's comfort. There's a particular kind of chronic over-apologizing that has almost nothing to do with remorse, and everything to do with a learned belief that your presence, your feelings, your preferences are somehow in the way, that you are, by default, a burden that should be minimized. That belief is a lie, and it may be one of the most quietly corrosive lies a person can carry. The philosopher Søren Kierkegaard wrote extensively about what he called despair, not in the dramatic surface-level sense of the word, but as a condition he described as failing to be oneself. His thinking may indicate that the deepest form of human suffering is not external hardship, but the internal experience of living as a diluted, pre-apologized version of who you actually are, performing smallness as a form of safety, editing yourself before anyone else gets the chance to reject you. That's a painful way to live, and most people doing it don't even realize it's happening because it starts so early, often in childhood, that it just feels like personality. It's not personality. It's a pattern, and patterns can change. Here's a useful distinction. There's a genuine apology and there's a social apology. A genuine apology acknowledges actual harm. I did something that hurt you and I'm sorry. That kind of apology is important. It's honest. It repairs things. A social apology is different. It's reflexive. It apologizes for existing, for having needs, for emotions that are inconvenient, for being present in a way that someone else might find challenging. Social apologizing doesn't repair anything. It just continuously signals, I believe I owe the world an apology for being here. And when you repeat that signal enough, to others, but more importantly to yourself, you start to believe it. Self-respect means learning to tell those two types of apologies apart. It means practicing the phrase, excuse me, instead of, I'm so sorry, when you need to get past someone. It means saying, I see it differently, instead of, I'm probably wrong, but. It means finishing your sentence without adding, does that make sense? At the end, not because you don't value clarity, but because that particular phrase has quietly become a way of asking permission to have had the thought in the first place. These are small things, but language shapes thought. The words you use consistently, especially about yourself, carve grooves in how you actually think. The philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein argued that the limits of our language are, in a meaningful sense, the limits of our world, which means the words aren't just reflecting how you feel about yourself, they're partly constructing it. So, choose them with more intention. Now, there's nuance here, and I want to be careful about it. This isn't a call to become abrasive, unapologetic in the genuine sense, or dismissive of other people's feelings. Self-respect doesn't mean steamrolling. It doesn't mean your truth automatically overrides everyone else's experience. What it means is this: you are allowed to take up space without pre-apologizing for it. You are allowed to have a perspective without framing it as something that probably doesn't matter. You are allowed to simply be in a room at full volume with your actual opinions, your actual feelings, your actual self, without performing smallness as a courtesy. The people in your life who are worth keeping around, they don't need you to be smaller. In fact, they're often waiting for you to stop apologizing long enough to actually show up. Here's your morning practice for this one. Starting tomorrow, just for one day, notice every time you say sorry or minimize yourself. Don't judge it. Just notice. Write it down if you can. By the end of the day, you'll probably be surprised at how many times it happened. And that awareness, that simple, clear seeing, is the beginning of changing it. Because you cannot change what you don't first see. As Maya Angelou observed, the way you treat yourself when nothing is at stake when no one is watching, when there's nothing to perform, that is the truest measure of your self-respect. The voice you use with yourself in private becomes the standard from which everything else flows, and it is worth paying very close attention to. Lesson 4. Your inner voice is either your greatest ally or your worst enemy. Let me ask you something uncomfortable. If someone followed you around all day, a real person, someone you could hear, and said to you everything you say to yourself inside your own head, would you let that person stay in your life? Take a second with that, because for most people, the honest answer is no, absolutely not. The things we say to ourselves, the quiet running commentary that never fully stops, would be completely unacceptable coming from anyone else. We'd call it abuse. We'd cut off contact. We'd tell our friends to leave. But because it's internal, because it feels like just thinking, we let it run, unchecked. For years, decades sometimes. The philosopher William James, one of the founders of American pragmatist philosophy, and a man who spent years wrestling with his own profound self-doubt, wrote something that still appears remarkably relevant to how we experience our inner lives. His thinking may suggest that the self is not a fixed, singular thing, but rather a collection of social and personal selves, some more honest than others, and that the voice we use in private conversation with ourselves tends to be the one that shapes all the others. It is the foundational voice, the one from which our actions, our relationships, and our sense of possibility all flow. Which means your inner voice isn't just background noise. It's an active participant in how your life unfolds. So, what does yours sound like? For a lot of people, it sounds like a critic who was never hired for the job, but showed up anyway and never left. It points out every flaw in real time. It replays every embarrassing moment at 3 in the morning with perfect, unforgiving clarity. It says things like, "You always do this, and you'll never change, and who do you think you are?" Phrases that are not only unkind, but statistically inaccurate, because always and never are almost never true. Here's what's worth understanding. That critical voice didn't originate with you. Nobody is born with a vicious inner critic. That voice is assembled piece by piece from things that were said to you, implied to you, or consistently modeled around you, usually early in life. A parent's disapproval, a teacher's dismissal, a peer group's casual cruelty. Over time, those external voices get internalized. They become yours, or at least you start to experience them as yours. But they're not originally. And recognizing that, really seeing it, creates a small but significant gap. A space where you can start to question whether the voice is accurate, rather than just automatically believing it, because it's loud and familiar. The morning practice here is one of the most important in this entire video. When you wake up tomorrow, before the phone, before the news, before the to-do list, spend 3 minutes just listening to what your inner voice is already saying. Don't engage with it. Don't argue with it. Just observe it the way you'd observe traffic from a window. Notice the tone. Notice the content. Is it problem-solving or is it punishing? Is it preparing you for the day, or is it already cataloging your inadequacies before you've even stood up? Then, and this is the shift, choose one thing to say to yourself that is both honest and kind. Not fake. Not affirmations that feel like lying to yourself. Something real and something gentle. Something like, "Today is going to ask things of me, and I'm going to handle it as well as I can." Or simply, "I'm still here." That counts for something. That's it. That's the practice. Small, daily, compounding. Because what philosophy has pointed toward across centuries, from the Stoics to the existentialists, is that the inner life responds to sustained attention and intentional direction. It is not fixed. The philosopher Aristotle argued that character itself is not something we are born with fully formed, but something we develop through repeated practice. Which means the inner voice you carry today is not necessarily the one you must carry forever. You are not stuck with the voice you inherited. You can build a better one. That's not naive optimism. That's ancient wisdom with a human face on it. One more thing. The goal here is not to create an inner voice that's relentlessly positive, because that's its own kind of distortion. The goal is accuracy with kindness. An inner voice that tells you the truth, but tells it to you the way a genuinely good mentor would. Someone who sees your flaws clearly and still fundamentally believes in your capacity. Someone who holds you accountable without holding you in contempt. That voice is available to you. You may just have to build it yourself. As the Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius wrote in his private journals, not for an audience, just for himself, which makes it somehow more honest. You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength. He wrote that to himself. As a reminder, because even he, emperor, philosopher, one of the most powerful men in the ancient world, had to keep redirecting his own inner voice back towards steadiness. If he needed the practice, you're allowed to need it too. The way you talk to yourself changes everything. Start the shift right here. Drop this in the comments. I speak to myself with kindness. Lesson 5. Respect your time like it actually belongs to you. Here's something that might land a little uncomfortably. The way you spend your time is a direct reflection of what you actually believe about your own worth. Not what you say you believe, what you act like you believe. Because talk is easy. We all say our time is valuable. We all know the phrase time is your most non-renewable resource. We've heard it 100 times. We've probably said it ourselves. And then we spend 45 minutes scrolling through content we don't even enjoy, or we agree to a commitment we deeply didn't want to make because saying no felt too uncomfortable in the moment. There's a gap, for most people a significant one, between what they intellectually know about the value of their time and how they actually spend it. And that gap, that's where self-respect either lives or quietly dies. The philosopher Seneca, writing from ancient Rome in letters that feel almost uncomfortably contemporary, addressed this with a directness that still cuts. In his essay On the Shortness of Life, he argued that life is not actually short. It is, he suggested, that we waste most of it, giving it away to trivialities, to other people's demands, to habits that serve nothing we genuinely value. His thinking may suggest that the person who lives fully is not the one who lives longest, but the one who wastes least. The problem is that giving your time away often looks like generosity. And sometimes it genuinely is. But there's a version of time giving that is not generosity at all. It's avoidance. It's the path of least resistance dressed up as helpfulness. And when you do that consistently, you end up living a life that's technically functional, but quietly hollow. A life assembled by default rather than chosen. Self-respect in this context means starting to make more intentional choices about where your hours go. Not perfectly, not with rigid scheduling that turns every day into a military operation, but with enough awareness that you can at least tell the difference between time spent in ways that genuinely serve you and time spent simply because it was easiest. Let me give you a real-world example of how this shows up. Think about someone. Maybe you recognize this person. Maybe it's been you at some point, who is genuinely talented at their work, smart, capable, the kind of person their team instinctively turns to when something hard needs to get done. And because of that, they become the default go-to for everything. More work gets added to their plate. More requests come in. More of their time gets claimed by other people's needs. And they say yes to almost all of it, not because they want to, but because they've conflated being useful with being valued, and they're afraid that saying no means being seen as less committed, less generous, less good. Over time, they have almost no hours left for the things that actually matter to them. Their own projects, their own rest, their own growth, all of it gets perpetually deferred. And they start to feel a low-grade resentment they can't quite name, because on the surface everything looks like success. That's not success. That's self-abandonment with a good performance review attached. Protecting your time isn't the same as being selfish or unhelpful. It's recognizing that your hours are a finite resource and distributing them thoughtlessly, or entirely according to other people's priorities, is a form of disrespect toward yourself. Quiet, daily, incremental disrespect. Your morning practice here is this. Before you open your calendar or your inbox tomorrow morning, spend 5 minutes writing down the one thing, just one, that would make today feel meaningful to you. Not productive in a generic sense. Meaningful, specifically to you. Then make a quiet promise to yourself that no matter what the day demands, that one thing gets some portion of your time and attention. One thing, every day, that belongs to you. It sounds small. Over time, it is anything but. Because what you're actually practicing is the belief, lived out in real behavior, not just thought, that your time is worth protecting, that your priorities deserve space in your own schedule, that you are not simply a resource to be allocated by whoever asks loudest. You are a person with a life, and your life is happening right now. As the poet Mary Oliver asked in one of her most quietly devastating lines, "Tell me, what is it you plan to do with your one wild and precious life?" She wasn't asking dramatically. She was asking practically, because the answer isn't in your intentions. It's in your calendar. What does yours say about what you believe you deserve? Your hours are the most honest reflection of what you believe you deserve. Own that truth. Type this: my time belongs to me. Lesson 6. Stop outsourcing your self-worth to other people's opinions. Let's be honest about something that most people won't admit out loud. A significant portion of the decisions you make every day, what you wear, what you say, how you present yourself, what you post, what you don't post, what career path you're on, what relationships you stay in, are quietly shaped by one underlying question: what will people think? Not all of it, not every decision, but more than you'd probably be comfortable acknowledging if you sat down and really traced the thread. And here's the thing. That question isn't entirely useless. We are social creatures. How we're perceived does have real consequences. Caring about our relationships and our reputation isn't pathological. It's human. The problem starts when that question stops being one input among many and becomes the primary filter through which you evaluate your own worth. When you can't feel good about a decision until someone else confirms it. When a single critical comment can unravel confidence that took months to build. When you're essentially renting your self-esteem from other people, and they don't even know they're your landlord. That's a genuinely precarious way to live, because other people's opinions are not a stable foundation. They shift, they contradict each other. They're often more about the person giving them than about you, and they are entirely outside your control, which means if they're running your internal life has no stable ground under it at all. The philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche wrote sharply about what he called herd morality, the tendency of people to measure their worth against the approval of the crowd rather than against their own internalized values. His thinking may suggest that a person who lives primarily for external validation has, in a meaningful sense, outsourced their autonomy. They are not living their own life. They are performing a version of life shaped by whoever is watching. The key insight here: We're not actually reading people's minds. We're projecting. We're taking a look, a pause, a neutral expression, and filling it with meaning. Usually the most threatening meaning our insecurity can generate, which means a significant portion of the judgment you're trying to avoid may not even be real. You're managing a threat that exists primarily in your own head, built from incomplete information, filtered through your own fears. That's exhausting. And it's worth stopping to really feel how exhausting it is. Now, there's an important distinction to make here. Not all feedback is projection. Not all opinions are irrelevant. There are people in your life, maybe a mentor, a genuinely close friend, someone who has earned the right to be honest with you, whose perspective is worth weighing carefully. Their observations can help you see blind spots. That's not outsourcing your worth. That's being open to growth. The difference is this: feedback from someone who knows you, respects you, and wants good things for you, that's worth considering. The ambient noise of general opinion, social media reaction, casual judgment from people who don't know your full story, that is not a reliable source of information about your value. Treating it as one is where the damage gets done. The philosopher Epictetus, who was born into slavery and built an entire philosophy around what remains within our control, kept returning to a single distinction that cuts through almost every anxiety about external opinion. Some things are in our power, and some things are not. What other people think of us falls firmly in the second category. Spending significant energy trying to manage, fix, or earn good opinions is, in his framing, a fundamental misallocation of the only resource we actually own, our own attention and response. Your morning exercise here is this: think right now, not in some abstract future, but right now, about whose opinion of you actually deserves significant weight. Write those names down. Keep the list honest and short. 2 people, 3, maybe 5 if you're genuinely lucky. Then, next time you find yourself spiraling over what someone might think, ask yourself, is that someone on the list? If yes, the concern is worth examining. If no, and it usually is a no, you're allowed to set it down. You're not required to carry every opinion someone has formed about you. Most of those opinions were formed quickly, from limited information, and revised or forgotten by the person who had them within days. You have held on to them far longer than the person who generated them. That's not loyalty, that's self-punishment. Deep self-respect means gradually, deliberately, moving your center of gravity inward, not becoming indifferent to others, but becoming more rooted in your own honest assessment of yourself than in the shifting weather of external perception. As Epictetus wrote, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." Other people's assessments of your worth are events that happen to you. They are not verdicts, they are not facts, they are simply things that occurred, and what you do with them is entirely, completely yours to decide. Nobody can take that from you. Not unless you hand it over. Stop handing your power to people who never asked for the responsibility. Reclaim it right now. I define myself. Lesson 7. Honor your own commitments, especially the ones you make to yourself. Quick question. If a friend asked you for a favor, something meaningful, something they genuinely needed, and you said yes, would you follow through? Almost certainly, because breaking a commitment to someone else has social consequences. There's accountability built in. They're counting on you. Their disappointment is real and visible and uncomfortable. Now, think about the last commitment you made to yourself. Something you said you'd do. Start that project. Take better care of your health. Spend less time on things that drain you. Begin something you've been postponing for months. Did you follow through? For most people, the honest answer is not consistently. And the reason isn't laziness or lack of motivation. Not really. The reason is that breaking a commitment to yourself has no immediate visible consequence. Nobody is disappointed. Nobody sends a follow-up message. The only person who knows is you. And you've become very good at forgiving yourself quickly enough that the discomfort doesn't fully register. But here's what's actually happening underneath that pattern. Every time you make a promise to yourself and don't keep it, you are, at a deep subconscious level, registering yourself as unreliable. Not consciously, not dramatically, just quietly, incrementally, building a case that your own word doesn't quite mean anything, that you don't quite mean anything, at least not enough to follow through for. The philosopher Aristotle spent considerable time thinking about what he called akrasia, the phenomenon of acting against one's own better judgment. His analysis may suggest that this isn't simply a failure of willpower, it's a failure of integrated character. When what we do consistently contradicts what we say we value, the resulting dissonance doesn't just feel uncomfortable, it erodes the coherence of the self over time. We become, in a meaningful sense, strangers to ourselves. In other words, you build trust in yourself the same way you build trust with anyone else, through repeated, small acts of following through, which means every time you honor a commitment to yourself, even a minor one, even one nobody else sees, you are actively building the psychological foundation that makes larger acts of self-respect possible, and every time you don't, you're quietly chipping away at it. This isn't about self-criticism. It's not about adding guilt to an already complicated inner life. It's about understanding the mechanics of self-trust, so you can start building it more deliberately. Here's a simple story that captures this well. There was a writer, someone who had wanted to write seriously for years, but kept telling himself he'd start when things calmed down, when the job was less busy, when the kids were older, when he had a proper writing space. The conditions were never quite right, so the commitment kept getting deferred. And every time it got deferred, he felt a small, familiar sting. Not quite shame, not quite sadness, something in between, that he'd gotten very good at moving past quickly. One day, he made himself a different kind of commitment. Not, I'll write when I have time, but I will write for 15 minutes every morning before I check my phone. That's it. 15 minutes. Small enough to be undeniable, specific enough to be trackable, and attached to an existing habit, the morning routine, so it didn't require willpower from scratch every day. 3 months later, he had the first draft of something real. Not because his life had cleared up, not because conditions had improved, but because he had started treating his commitment to himself with the same basic seriousness he'd always given to commitments made to others. The thing he built wasn't just a draft, it was evidence. Evidence that he could be counted on, by himself, for himself. And that evidence changed something in how he moved through the rest of his life too. That's what self-respect looks like in motion, not grand gestures, not dramatic reinventions, just the daily practice of meaning what you say to yourself. Your morning practice here is this: make one commitment to yourself today. Just one. Make it specific. Not I'll be healthier, but I will drink water before coffee this morning. Make it small enough that there is no reasonable excuse for not doing it. And then do it. Not because the outcome matters enormously, but because the act of following through sends you a message that compounds over time. I keep my word, even to myself. That sentence, lived out over weeks and months, rewires something fundamental. As Aristotle observed, we are what we repeatedly do. Excellence, then, is not an act, but a habit. He wasn't talking about talent. He was talking about repetition, about the slow, unsexy, profoundly powerful work of becoming someone through consistent behavior. You become someone who respects themselves by repeatedly acting like someone who respects themselves. The feeling follows the behavior, not the other way around. That's the sequence most people get backwards. They wait to feel worthy before they act worthy. But philosophy, across centuries, across cultures, points in the same direction. Act first. Feel it catch up. It will catch up. Every small promise you keep to yourself builds the person you are becoming. Seal that commitment. Drop this. I keep my word to myself. Lesson 8. Embrace solitude without feeling like something is wrong with you. Let's talk about something that makes a lot of people quietly uncomfortable. Being alone, not lonely, not isolated, not cut off from connection, just alone, willingly. Without filling the silence with noise, without reaching for the phone the moment the discomfort of stillness starts to creep in, without needing something external playing in the background just to make your own company feel bearable. For a lot of people, that kind of solitude, clean, voluntary, unmedicated by distraction, is genuinely hard. And the difficulty itself is revealing, because if you can't be alone with yourself without immediately needing to escape that experience, it may suggest something worth examining, that your own company doesn't feel like enough, that the silence holds something you'd rather not hear. That's not a character flaw, but it is information. The philosopher Paul Tillich wrote something that still feels surprisingly current. He drew a distinction between loneliness and solitude, describing loneliness as the pain of being alone and solitude as the glory of being alone. His argument was that genuine solitude, chosen, inhabited fully, not fled from, is not an absence of something good. It's a presence, a specific kind of presence with yourself that cannot be accessed any other way. Deep self-respect requires that presence, because you cannot fully know what you think, what you value, what you actually want from your life, if you never spend any unstructured time with yourself. If every quiet moment gets immediately filled with podcasts, with scrolling, with the ambient company of other people's voices, you never develop a genuine relationship with your own inner life. And without that relationship, self-respect has no solid object. You're respecting an image of yourself, a social performance of yourself, rather than the actual complex person underneath. The philosopher Blaise Pascal observed something in the 17th century that feels almost prophetically relevant today. He wrote that all of humanity's problems stem from the inability to sit quietly in a room alone. He wasn't being dramatic. He was pointing at something precise, that the discomfort of stillness drives people toward distraction, toward noise, toward constant external engagement, as a way of avoiding the confrontation with themselves that silence inevitably produces. What fills that silence instead is largely reactive, responding to other people's content, other people's opinions, other people's emotional states as amplified through a screen. The cumulative effect appears to be a gradual erosion of your ability to sense and interpret your own internal states, your emotional signals, your needs, your actual preferences as distinct from preferences you've absorbed from the environment around you. You stop knowing what you think because you never stop to think it. Solitude is the correction to that, not as a permanent state. Connection is essential, human relationships are irreplaceable, but as a daily practice, a regular returning to yourself. Here's your morning practice for this lesson, and it's the simplest one in the entire video. Spend 10 minutes tomorrow morning doing absolutely nothing. No phone, no music, no podcast playing in the background while you pretend to be present. Just sit, with your coffee, with the window, with whatever the morning actually feels like. Let the thoughts come. Let them pass. Notice what surfaces when you stop curating your inner experience. You might find it uncomfortable at first. That discomfort is not a problem. It's actually the beginning of the practice, the moment where you're finally close enough to your actual inner life that you can start to hear it clearly. The goal over time is to become someone who genuinely enjoys their own company. Not in a self-congratulatory way, but in the way you'd enjoy the company of someone you know deeply, trust completely, and are genuinely glad to spend time with. That person, the one you should know most deeply, trust most completely, be most genuinely glad to spend time with, is you. It may take a while to feel that way. Start with 10 minutes. As the poet Rainer Maria Rilke wrote in his letters to a young poet, "I hold this to be the highest task of a bond between two people, that each should stand guard over the solitude of the other." He was writing about relationships, but the principle applies inward too. Stand guard over your own solitude. Protect the space where you get to exist without performance, without productivity, without being useful to anyone. That space is where you remember who you actually are. Silence is not emptiness. It is where you finally get to meet yourself. Celebrate that. Type this below. My own company is enough. Lesson 9. Choose growth over comfort, because comfort without challenge is slowly shrinking you. We've arrived at the 9th lesson, and I want to be careful with this one, because it's probably the most misused idea in the entire self-improvement space, and I don't want to add to that problem. Get comfortable with being uncomfortable. You've heard that. Probably too many times. Said too loudly, too confidently, usually by someone who makes it sound like discomfort is always productive and ease is always suspect. That framing isn't just oversimplified. It's occasionally harmful. Rest is not laziness. Recovery is not avoidance. Choosing peace is not always choosing stagnation. So let me reframe this more carefully. The issue isn't comfort itself. Comfort is not the enemy. The issue is chronic comfort as a default, the pattern of consistently choosing what's familiar, what's safe, what requires nothing new from you, not because you need rest, but because growth has started to feel like something you'll get to eventually. Someday, when conditions are better. That someday has a cost, and it's paid quietly, over time, in the slow narrowing of what you believe yourself to be capable of. The philosopher John Dewey, whose thinking on experience and growth remains one of the most carefully argued cases for continuous human development ever assembled, suggested that genuine learning doesn't happen in comfort. It happens at the edge of experience, where what you currently know meets what you haven't encountered yet. His philosophy may indicate that a life without that edge isn't simply a comfortable life, it's a contracting one. The person who never stretches doesn't stay the same size. They quietly shrink. Too far inside the comfort zone, you plateau. Nothing changes. The skills you have stay exactly where they are. Too far outside it, you get overwhelmed, freeze, or collapse into avoidance. Right at the edge, that's where the real work happens. Self-respect, in this context, means having enough regard for your own potential to keep bringing yourself back to that edge, not dramatically, not through grand gestures of reinvention that last 2 weeks before reality reasserts itself, but through consistent, small, intentional stretches, the kind that accumulate into genuine transformation over time. Because here's what chronic comfort does to a person, and this part matters. When you consistently avoid challenge, when you always take the easier path, always defer the harder conversation, always choose what's known over what might be better, you don't just stay the same. You actually contract. Your sense of what you're capable of quietly shrinks to match the evidence your behavior is generating. And once that contraction becomes your baseline, growth starts to feel not just uncomfortable, but uncharacteristic. It starts to feel like you're pretending to be someone you're not, when in reality, you're just becoming someone slightly larger than who you've settled for. The opposite of that is also true. Every time you do the harder thing, every time you make the call you've been avoiding, Start the project that genuinely scares you. Say the honest thing instead of the comfortable one. You generate new evidence about who you are. Evidence that you are someone capable of difficulty, someone who can be trusted to stretch when stretching is required. That evidence accumulates, and it changes the story you tell yourself about what's possible for you. Your morning practice for this lesson is this. Identify one thing you've been avoiding, not because you genuinely need more time, but because starting it feels uncomfortable. Just one thing. And today, do the smallest possible version of it. Not the whole thing, not perfectly, just enough to break the avoidance, enough to generate one small piece of evidence that you are someone who does hard things. That first step is disproportionately important, not because of what it produces externally, but because of what it proves internally. Now, and this is where I want to bring it all together. The 9 lessons we've covered today are not separate, isolated ideas. They form a web. They reinforce each other. When you stop waiting for external validation, you have more energy to honor your own commitments. When you protect your time, you create space for solitude. When you build a kinder inner voice, setting boundaries becomes less terrifying. When you stop apologizing reflexively, you start to hear what you actually think. They compound. That's the point. You don't have to do all 9 perfectly starting tomorrow. You just have to start somewhere and let the rest build from there. As the philosopher Heraclitus observed, character is destiny, not talent, not circumstance, not the opinions of others. Character, the thing you build through repeated daily honest choices about who you are and how you treat yourself. You are not finished. You are not fixed. You are not the sum of your current limitations or your past patterns or the opinions of people who only knew one version of you. You are, right now, in the middle of becoming something. And the direction of that becoming? That's something you have more influence over than you might currently believe. You did not come this far to stay small. Take one more step forward and leave this in the comments. I choose growth daily. We've covered 9 lessons today. 9 real, grounded, genuinely challenging ideas about what deep self-respect looks like. Not as a feeling you stumble into, but as a practice you build, morning by morning, decision by decision, word by word. Let me bring them back briefly, not to repeat, but to land. You stopped waiting for someone else to confirm your value. You learned that boundaries are definitions, not walls. You caught yourself apologizing for existing and started choosing presence instead. You listened to your inner voice, really listened, and decided to start building a better one. You looked at your calendar and asked whether it reflects someone who believes their time matters. You stopped renting your self-worth from other people's opinions and started moving your center of gravity inward. You made a commitment to yourself and kept it, because that's how self-trust gets rebuilt. You sat in solitude long enough to remember who's actually there, and you brought yourself back to the edge of growth, because that edge is where you actually live. 9 lessons, one underlying truth threading through all of them. You are worth showing up for, fully, consistently, starting now, not when you've fixed everything, not when you've earned it through enough suffering or enough achievement or enough years of trying, not when someone important finally sees it, now, as you are, with everything unresolved and everything still in motion. That's not a comfortable idea for a lot of people. Comfort is earned, we're taught. Worth is conditional. Rest is a reward for productivity. Self-regard is something you build toward, not something you start from. But what if that sequence is simply wrong? What if self-respect isn't the destination? What if it's the starting point? What if the version of you who shows up each morning and chooses to treat themselves with dignity and seriousness and genuine care? What if that's not the end result of all the work, but the condition that makes all the other work possible? The philosopher William James wrote that the greatest revolution of his generation was the discovery that human beings, by changing the inner attitudes of their minds, could change the outer aspects of their lives. He wrote that not as a motivational slogan. He wrote it as a philosophical conclusion, arrived at through years of thinking carefully about how human beings actually change and what makes that change possible. Your inner attitudes are not fixed. Your story is not finished. Your mornings, those first quiet minutes before the world starts making demands, are genuinely yours. What you do with them, what you say to yourself in them, what you choose to believe about yourself inside them, that is the practice, that is the work. Small, daily, unremarkable from the outside, and absolutely transformative from the inside. So, here's what I want you to do right now. Before you click away, before the next video starts, before the moment passes, pick one lesson from today. Just one that landed for you. Maybe it was the inner voice, maybe it was the boundaries, maybe it was the solitude, maybe it was the commitments. Pick the one that felt most like a mirror. And do one thing differently tomorrow morning because of it. One thing. That's all. Let that be enough for today. Because you don't have to reinvent yourself all at once. You just have to take the next honest step. And then the one after that. And over time, over real, imperfect, genuinely lived time, those steps become a direction. And that direction becomes a life that actually feels like yours. That's what deep self-respect makes possible.